Our next speaker is Claire Culwell. Claire Culwell is an abortion survivor with a miraculous story. She is an internationally known pro-life speaker and author. She has been featured in Fox News, Focus on the Family, and many other medias. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, I'm honored to be here with you in our great state of Texas. I am from East Texas. I grew up in Austin, and so as a Texan, it's truly an honor to be joining together and celebrating the overturning of Roe v. Wade with you in our country and what that means for us here in Texas. At the moment of the overturning of Roe v. Wade, I can say I was so proud to be a Texan because I knew what that meant. Our trigger law would go into effect, which banned abortion altogether, and this was important to me because I have been deeply affected by abortion. By show of hands, can you show me if you've been impacted by abortion in some way? Would you raise your hand? And if you're here, keep your hands up. If you're here today because you know someone who's been impacted by abortion and you heard their story, it impacted your life, and that's why you're here today, would you raise your hand? Look around. So many of us have been impacted by abortion, and I'm so grateful. Okay, keep your hands up for a picture. If you've been impacted by abortion, know somebody who's been impacted by abortion. This is why this matters, what we're doing here today. This is why we march, because someone like me, someone like you, somebody like your friend, somebody like your neighbor has been impacted by abortion. And it is the greatest injustice of our time. While we stand here together celebrating the overturning of Roe v. Wade, what that has meant for Texas, something all of us prayed would happen in our lifetime. Amen? Amen. We must also recognize what this means for the future of Texas and our country. It means that it is time for all of us to step up and walk alongside women and families, providing resources, support, and assistance during pregnancies and beyond. We must choose to be the solution in a woman's moment of desperation when she is pregnant, scared, and feels like she has nowhere to go. A solution for a woman like my birth mother. And I'll tell you her story in just a moment. But she told me when I met her, and she told me how abortion had impacted us. She told me that she was desperately looking for someone like you and I to stand in the gap for her, to walk alongside of her, to tell her that she was strong enough and capable of being a mother. And so today, as I share my story with you, I'd like to encourage you to start this year of 2023 by choosing to be the type of person that my birth mother needed in her moment of crisis 35 years ago. And that's a person of integrity who stands for truth, who stands for wisdom, who fights for women, families, and children, and recognizes how we are all created in the image of God with a purpose and a plan. I grew up as an adopted child. If you come visit me in the back, I have some of my books afterwards. My parents are here who adopted me. And my sister and I were both adopted, and we can't imagine having a better upbringing as adopted children. All we knew about ourselves all of our lives was that we were wanted, chosen, and loved. Those were things that were spoken over us. We knew we had birth mothers. We knew that they could possibly become a part of our story one day. We didn't know what that would look like. We didn't know what their reasoning was for placing us for adoption. All we knew was that we were so grateful for our lives, for our family, and that we were wanted, chosen, and loved. And so I think if you would have asked me, being somebody that adoption was such an incredible part of my story, it was such a positive thing in our home, but abortion wasn't something we ever spoke about. I think if you would have asked me growing up if I would ever be the type of person who'd be impacted by abortion, I would have said absolutely not. That will never be me. The type of person who is impacted abortion doesn't grow up in my type of family with a solid upbringing like mine, doesn't grow up in my neighborhood, in my church, and yet I met my birth mother in 2009 and found out that I was the type of person who'd been impacted by abortion and that everything I believed about abortion was wrong. In college, I had this great plan for my life. I was going to be a home care nurse. I'm an introvert. I would have never picked being on a stage talking about abortion if I had my way, but I had this great plan for my life, and so I was studying to be a nurse, and there was a Planned Parenthood in College Station, and it was the Planned Parenthood that Abby Johnson ran, if you've seen the movie Unplanned. And I would see these people out there. They looked like they were praying, standing facing this building. I didn't know that Planned Parenthood provided abortions, much less that they were our nation's largest abortion provider, but I stopped and I asked these people what they were doing out in front of this Planned Parenthood. And they told me they knew what abortion is, what it does to a baby, what it does to a woman, that there were resources available to them. There were alternatives to abortion, like adoption, like parenting, and that women were strong and capable of motherhood. And I supported that, but I wiped my hands clean that day and thought, I will never do that. That will never be me. And yet that was my first glimpse of God's bigger picture for my life, because after I met my birth mother, I would go back to those people on the sidewalk and tell them that I learned that I was the type of person who'd been affected by abortion. My sister met her birth mother when I was in college, and after I had the opportunity to meet her birth mother, it really got me thinking about my own birth mother, because I recognized the beauty in my sister's birth mother giving my sister something she couldn't, which was a daddy. And that was the reason for her placing her for adoption. And so I went home after meeting my sister's birth mother and realizing what an impact she had on our family, and opened up the conversation with my parents about meeting my birth mother. And so I called my adoption agency on the phone, and a woman named Debbie answered the phone, and I told her who I was. I told her that I wanted to search for my birth mother. I wanted to thank my birth mother for giving me my life and my family. I knew what a gift that was. And she told me that she actually was staring at my baby picture on her desk. She had had it there for 21 years because she had been my birth mother's caseworker. And the woman who was my birth mother's caseworker 21 years before actually reunited my birth mother and I in March of 2009. And it was an incredible reunion. We met in Dallas, and I opened the door for the first time. I laid eyes on my birth mother, and it was incredible. I looked just like her. My sister, the first remark that she had was, "Now we know why you're a whole 5 foot nothing," because my birth mother was half an inch shorter than me. But it was great. I knew I was so grateful to her, and I knew that I wanted to have a second meeting with her, and so we planned that. And this time it would be in May 2009, I would go to Oklahoma where my birth mother Tanya lived, and I would get to visit her, and I would get to really open up that conversation of how grateful I was to her. And little did I know that this meeting with my birth mother would change my life forever. I actually thanked my birth mother that day for giving me my life, for giving me my family. I had a ring and a necklace with my birthstone on it, and I had a card that said, "Thank you for choosing life for me" on it. And I watched as she opened these gifts and read the words on the card as she broke down into tears. And she told me, I didn't choose life for you. And I remember being so confused as she wept and she shook, and she told me that she didn't choose life for me and that my life was a miracle, and wondering what could that possibly mean. And she took me into another room in her home, and we sat down on the bed, and she said, "Claire, I was 13. And she began describing being 13 years old and pregnant with me, and having a mother who told her that there was one choice for her, and that was to have an abortion, and how my birth mother had a D&E, which is a dismemberment abortion, while she was pregnant with me. And she went back to the doctors a few weeks later after she realized things didn't seem right, and they told her that they had accidentally missed my body when they had successfully aborted my twin, and that I had survived my birth mother's abortion. My birth mother was actually driven to Kansas to have a second abortion, but was miraculously turned away. They told her that they couldn't provide this second abortion because they had ripped the amniotic sac that I was in, and I was a very tiny baby, and I was coming soon. And so they sent her home, they sent her on bed rest, and so my birth mother was dropped off at the adoption agency where Debbie was, the lady who answered my phone call, who then reunited my birth mother and I. And so my birth mother lived there for a few weeks until I was born. I was born weighing 3 pounds. I was 10 weeks premature. I had a dislocated hip. I had clubbed feet. I went through body casts as a child to correct these complications that the doctors told my birth mother were caused by the attempted abortion on my life. And so in that moment, I realized, I learned that I was a twinless twin in the name of choice, and that I was an abortion survivor. Something that I never even thought existed, much less would happen to me. I was all of a sudden unwanted, rejected, and aborted. But as my birth mother told me these things, these truths about my birth, about my life, about herself, all I could see was her tears. This was the most life-altering thing that had ever happened to not only me, but to my birth mother. And I knew, because of how I was raised, that I had a choice to either be angry and upset and walk away, or to forgive my birth mother. And I chose to forgive my birth mother. And I knew that all those things my parents spoke over me all my life, that I was wanted, chosen, and loved, that my circumstances didn't define who I was, that is what defined who I was, because that's who God said I was, that He said those things about her too. And this was my opportunity to forgive my birth mother, so that hopefully one day she could come to know Jesus and accept what He did for her on the cross, just like He had done for me. And so a few weeks later, I went back to the people on the sidewalk who had been praying, and I told them my story, and they cried with me. They had just helped Abby Johnson leave her job. She had been the director of that Planned Parenthood for 8 years and had walked away after seeing an ultrasound-guided abortion. And they had just helped her a couple weeks before, and then I walked in and told them my miraculous story, and they helped me. And they said, "Claire, you've got to share this story." And I thought, no way. There's no way that I'm such an introvert. I hate controversy. I didn't want to talk about the most painful thing that had happened to me and to my birth mother. But they said, "Claire, the impact of your story could be huge." And I think that they knew what I didn't know. They knew that my story could give a face and a name and a story to the aborted baby. And so I began to share my story. When people talk about women's rights, they're forgetting something very important, a detail that cannot be left out. I was not my birth mother's body. I was a separate human being inside of my birth mother's body. I've often been disregarded by the media, even by our representatives in Texas. Why? Because my humanity exposes the humanity of the unborn child. To look at me and to hear my story today, you must acknowledge and face the truth. Because when you look at my face, you're looking at my twin. You're looking at the aborted baby. Because of that, abortion is the greatest injustice of our time, because it disregards the humanity of a person and ends their life while they're in the most defenseless state. That's what happened when my twin was dismembered in the womb next to me. And so I want to ask you, what would it look like if we let the reality of abortion and what it has done, not only in our country, but right here in Texas, right here in our families and our communities, what would it look like if we let the reality of that move us us to action in 2023 like it is today, moving us to march, to be active, to make a statement. Because I think it goes beyond that. I think it goes beyond what we're doing here today. And if you've heard anything from my story today, I hope that it moves you to action. Being pro-life, not just with our words, but with our actions. Doing something. If Planned Parenthood has been saying we're here for you for decades, we should be saying it even louder, especially when this is life or death for someone like me, someone like my twin. Because of each of you and your unapologetic stand for life, I believe we are creating a culture of life in Texas, and we are creating solutions in this post-Roe Texas that we're living in. While we celebrate a new Texas that protects women, protects life in 2023, we must remember our work, our real work, begins now, right here today. As we join hands with women like my birth mother in their time of need and unapologetically use our voices, connections, gifts, talent, and resources to create a ripple effect in our communities until everyone in Texas knows that they don't have to walk alone, because in Texas, we unite for life. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Claire, for that wonderful story. We thank God for your life.